This video looks at EMIS Web remote consultations from the point of view of the clinician seeing patients booked via remote consultations. A separate video looks at how remote consultations can be configured, published and booked from the point of view of admin and reception teams. So, what is EMIS remote consultations? EMIS cross-organisation appointments allows any configured EMIS organisation to publish appointment slots that can be booked into by other EMIS organisations with whom there is an appropriate sharing agreement. For example, an alliance may have a sharing agreement in place for all practices to be able to find and book appointments at the local extended access hub. EMIS also supports data sharing agreements which let clinicians in one organisation, for example the extended access hub, view data from other organisations, for example the patient's registered practice. What EMIS remote consultations does is it takes these two existing solutions one step further and not only allows an appointment to be made for a patient at a different EMIS organisation, but also turns the appointment slot into a direct link into that patient's GP record. The clinician seeing the patient can therefore not only view the full patient's record, but can also add the consultation directly into the patient's registered GP system. This has many benefits. For example, as the consultation is saved into the patient's registered practice system, the one patient, one care record approach is supported, avoiding duplication of data input and the chances of errors in transferring of data from service to service. Patients do not have to be registered at the organisation providing the remote consultations, so no patient data is stored within that organisation's EMIS database. So how does this work in practice? Firstly, only organisations that are part of an enterprise appointments agreement are able to book and cancel appointments for remote consultations. All organisations within that agreement can publish appointments for all other organisations to find and book. As a clinician, these are the key things to be aware of. When viewing the appointment book, any appointment with this red arrow icon to the left of it is an appointment that was available to be booked by other practices. Hovering over a remote consultation appointment slot will give you two extra pieces of information that you would not have for a standard appointment. Firstly, you can see the name of the booking organisation, which is most likely to be the patient's registered practice, although there are more unusual cases where this might be a different organisation. And secondly, you can see a legitimate relationship note that tells you when the legitimate relationship that has been created between you and the patient expires. The legitimate relationship time can be configured by the group of practices implementing remote consultation. By default, it is 28 days, which is also the maximum allowable period. However, this can be changed to a shorter period. The time period starts when you first access the patient's record during the consultation. The remote consultation booked slot has created a direct link into the patient's own registered practice EMIS system. Only the session holder can use the remote consultation link within the appointment slot. So the reception team can record the patient as having arrived, but are then not able to perform any other actions on that patient. And only 3 RBAC roles are able to use the remote consultation links. These are Clinical Practitioner Access Role, Nurse Access Role, and Healthcare Professional Access Role. So providing you're the session holder and you have one of the permitted RBAC roles, you will be able to select the patient in a remote consultation appointment slot and use Send In to trigger the remote consultation link. If anyone who is not the session holder or does not have the correct RBAC role tries to send a patient in, they will receive this message and will just be returned to the appointment session list. On Send In, a new EMIS instance opens in a new window. You'll see the following message, although sometimes it appears only very briefly. You do not have to put in any login credentials, as these are automatically picked up by EMIS. In the new window, you will now see that you're in the patient's care record on their registered practice system. A purple banner like this will appear at the bottom of the screen as a constant reminder of the fact that you're now working directly in another practice's EMIS system. You can move around the patient's record, accessing all care record modules. When you're ready to add the consultation, you'll notice that the consultation type defaults to Enterprise Consultation. It's recommended that you leave this, as this provides a useful way for practices to identify which consultations have been added via remote consultations. You cannot access any other modules within the practice's EMIS system, and you cannot swap to a different patient. All your activity will be logged in the target practice's audit trail as standard. There are some functional restrictions when using remote consultations. You are not able to use the following functions: e-referrals, e-prescribing, online test requests, or third-party partner products. And when viewing the patient's record, bear in mind that you will not be able to see all DocMan documents unless you have alternative DocMan functionality available locally. The service you're working for will have agreed procedures for managing these functions. When using remote consultations, you are working within the patient's own registered practice EMIS system, so any clinical templates, protocols, document templates, etc. will be those of the registered practice. These may well mean that the templates that you're used to using in your own or other practices are not necessarily available in the same format or from the same folder within the target practice. Likewise, EMIS protocols may be launched by the target practice system that you're not familiar with, and best practice dictates that you follow any practice protocols on behalf of the practice. The same can be said for cough alerts, for example. Respond to these in the way that you would do if they were your own practice patients. Any confidentiality policies on a patient's record will still apply through remote consultations. If you opt to send a task, the task group list will be that of the registered practice. The service you're working for will have agreed procedures for sending tasks from within remote consultations. It's important to remember that any user sent a task from a remote consultation will not be able to reply to that task, so be careful when and for what reason you send tasks in these circumstances. If you're seeing a patient from a dispensing practice who is a dispensing patient, be aware that when issuing prescriptions, you need to check that the script you're about to issue does not get sent to the patient's practice's dispensing queue. Check that dispensing is not displayed in the issue dialog box as shown here. If it is, select Change All from the top bar of the issue dialog and pick NHS printed script. Don't worry about changing this back, as the system will default back to dispensing for that patient when you've finished. It's possible that you might miss this, but if you do, don't worry, as it can easily be mended. The likely indication that you've missed this will be that the prescription doesn't print out as you would expect it to. So if the prescription doesn't print, check the patient's dispensing status, and if they're a dispensing patient, simply go into their medication record on EMIS and cancel the issue that you've just made. This will not only cancel the issue, but also cancel the item from the practice's dispensing queue. Then issue again, this time changing the designation to NHS printed script. When you've completed the consultation, save as normal. You'll notice that you're not immediately returned to the appointment book. For a remote consultation, once you've saved, you need to close down the instance of EMIS Web using the red close option in the top right, or go to the EMIS ball and close down. This now closes the link to the patient's registered practice and returns you to the appointment book for your service. You must then mark the patient as having left. If you forget to do this, EMIS will remind you when you try to access the next patient's record. For as long as the legitimate relationship time period lasts, you will be able to revisit and view or amend the patient's record by returning to the appointment slot and opting to View Medical Record. Remember that no one else is able to access the record, only the session holder, including all through the legitimate relationship period. If you're viewing records of your own patients in your own practice, you'll be able to see any consultations that have been added via remote consultation. Firstly, they'll be marked with this icon, and they will also have the consultation type of enterprise consultation. Lastly, remember that all activity in remote consultations is fully auditable in the patient's record at their registered practice, and you can right-click on any consultation to view the full audit trail for that individual contact. That concludes this presentation. Take a look at some of our other videos that are targeted specifically towards clinicians.